Good morning, and thank you so much for coming back to Sarita Talks. We've got some awesome guests that it's a blessing to have them on the show. Robert T. Lilly doing some excellent things with advocacy and the public defender's office, but a powerful story to tell. You know, a lot of us that have been incarcerated, we were talking before we connected here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Robert about the rawness and the honesty that comes with not admitting, but talking about our experiences being locked up, our experiences being a prisoner, our experiences about being reduced to a number. I'm not number 1209553 in the Missouri Department of Corrections. That's not who I am. And Robert is not his past. But we're going to talk a little bit about that healing that can come from talking about the trauma. And we're going to talk about his awesome book coming out. Robert, thank you for coming on. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and it's great to see your face again and to be with you on your program, Sarita Talks.
Well, I thank you. I thank you. We want to talk about definitely this book you've written, and it's going to be very prolific. I'm excited to see where it goes. Inside Out, a Texas Prison's Poetry Story. So look at this book. I want everybody to go on. Is it on Amazon?
It's not on Amazon, but we can give you you can go to my website, robertlilly.com, and you can find it on our products page. And so we have it listed there.
Okay, now tell me a little bit about your journey to writing the book. And I know that we had talked about some juvenile incarceration, some different, what we call them bits, different times down. However, that doesn't define who you are. And we're talking about healing. So tell us a little bit about what got us to where we're at today.
All right, I'm going to try to summarize all of what you just put in that one question in this one phrase. Although I'm not my past, I am the sum total of my knowledge and experience, right? So I am a composition of all of the things that I've endured, encountered, experienced, and overcome. And I'm still yet becoming, because with every day that I live, I learn more, I grow more, and I become more of who I'm supposed to be. So as a child of 14 years old, I started writing raps. I love writing. In fact, that's one of the saving graces in my life. I went to school in the South Bronx in New York City, and the schools in the 1970s were a complete sham for anything called education. It was underfunded, overcrowded, under-resourced, and it was a madhouse. But I was able to leave the schools in the South Bronx by my father's grace. He moved us to Westchester, New York. And in the schools in Westchester, New York, which were predominantly Jewish and Italian, where the resources were different for the makeup of that community, I was able to access some quality teachers. But it came at a cost. School became a very difficult place for me to be as a young Black boy. My behavior was continuously identified as problematic, and that would ultimately translate into other experiences I would have later on as I moved from New York to California, where some of my responses now to these earlier offenses in school context became behavior that was easily identified as criminal.
Let me interrupt you real quick. Just because you said they had labeled it as problematic behavior, these labels are what hold us and pigeonhole people. And they can also become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell a child enough, and I remember when I was experiencing problematic behavior, a woman said to me, "You're going to end up in prison. You're going to end up in prison." She spoke that over my life. She gave me a title. She gave me a label of my problematic behavior. So once more, let's go back. Let me go back to you and tell us about what happened when you moved.
Well, my mother had passed when I was 8. So my father had it in his mind that my mother wanted to live in California. So he honored that wish, her death wish, and he moved all of his children, me being the oldest, to New York, from New York to California. And obviously, as a child, I was not interested in moving away from everything that I was familiar with. So this was a big culture shock for me. When I got to when I got to California from New York, I was in denial. I was resistant to the whole idea of being a resident of that state, and of course I was heartbroken. So not only was I devastated from the loss of my mother and all these subsequent things that would occur as a result of my father trying to replace my mother with other partners who weren't always good or kind to us. I was also resentful for the fact that I had no say in the matter. He didn't consult us, and mind you, I was a child. Perhaps that was an unrealistic expectation, but nonetheless, it caused me a lot of emotional turmoil. And one of the first go-tos that I had to soothe myself was alcohol and drugs.
Mm.
And unfortunately, you know, mixing alcohol and drugs with public consumption as a child or consumption on school property quickly becomes, you know, identified as problematic. And instead of help or support or treatment and care and concern, I was given criminalization and punishment.
You know, that really resonates with me because they just came out with a new title for victims of domestic violence who have went to prison for it, and it's criminalized survivor. And I'm
Mm.
so glad that I finally have something that I feel like I can embrace. I feel like that is an accurate title for what I've been through in my lived experience. However, when I was in prison, I was taught that, oh, I'm a victimizer. It doesn't matter what happened to me, that, I'm the one that's responsible, and that's just the way it is. So I like the way that that is something that benefits me, but I don't like that you were criminalized. But that's exactly what happened, and it translates.
Yeah, you know, I heard years ago terms that were being cast around in our society to categorize and label persons like myself. The biggest one was super predator. And I rejected that, even though I didn't understand politically the full implications of that language. On a deep personal level, I understood when they talk about that population on television, they're talking about me. They're not saying Robert T. Lilly, but that's designed to do something to me. I didn't have the word criminalization at the time. I didn't have the word dehumanization. But as I began to study and learn, thanks to my, having acquired the ability to read in school, I
Mhm.
could begin to understand these larger concepts that were happening in our social environment that were not for my benefit. In fact, they were to my detriment. And it was imperative for me, I felt at some point, that I had to grab a hold of how to respond to it in ways that weren't overly emotional and wouldn't continue to put me at risk of incarceration. Because at some point, as I became aware of the ominous forces that were operating in my community to keep us impoverished and our communities blighted, I got angry and I felt justified in responding with anger. But unfortunately, that wasn't the most appropriate response because it didn't lead to solutions. I
Right.
needed better solutions, hence my transitioning later on into the work of advocacy and organizing and writing, because all of these have been ways in which I've not only found my purpose, but I found how I personally can heal from the earlier wounds and tragedies of my life, which is something that eluded me for almost 30 years of my life. I didn't know what it meant to heal.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing your healing journey with us. Does that tie back into the poetry in the book?
Absolutely. I mean, in prison, as you well know, you have your mind and you have your bed. And when the two come together, you lay there and you replay that tape called life over and over
Mm-hmm.
again. And you ask yourself, what was happening in this instance? What was happening in? So I started remembering all of the childhood experiences, not every one of them, but as many as I could recollect, especially the ones that were significant to me. And
Right.
at some point, I remember coming in contact with a group in the federal system, and there was a group of children that were being brought into the prison. And these men who were selected were able to go talk to these children. It was kind of like a scared straight program, but I don't think it was they were trying to scare them. I think they were just trying to, enlighten them and encourage them and open their eyes to the reality of the decision making process that they were brought there for, being more critical of. And I asked them, I said, I'd like to be a part of this group. And they said, well, the only way you can be a part of this group is you've got to sit down and write out your whole story and determine what was the reason that you went to prison. You have to figure that out. And I
Wow.
was like, I had never done that before. And I took them up on the challenge. I sat down and I began to write. And I learned something. I discovered something that transformed me as it relates to the written word and its utility for my own purposes of healing. As I was writing this story, I came to a point where I understood something in my journey. When my mother died and my father, sought other partners. Uh, I responded to that with great resistance because number one, I was reeling from my mother's untimely loss. She was 25 when she
Mhm.
passed. I was 8 years old. And then
Mm.
secondly, him bringing in these women to the household as partners, trying to find somebody to support him. These women didn't always care for us. They wanted the relationship with him, but we were extra. And so I reacted to that with resentment and anger. And that led me to understand that all of the acting out that I did when I went outside those doors, the fighting, the cursing, the yelling, just the misbehavior, it really
Mhm.
grew out of the pain that I was experiencing in that household that I never knew how to
Absolutely.
process. I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, that's an adverse childhood effect. That's an ACE. And let me tell
Yes.
you, poverty, this is what happened to me. When my parents split up, not the same as a death in the family, but losing a parent is what happened. And as a result, I was put into a new environment. We were in poverty. I had new friends. They weren't doing the right thing. And I became someone that I hadn't been before. I was up until 12 years old. I had a two-parent family. We went to church all the time. These are the things that made up my life. And in one moment, it was totally different, totally different.
Well, actually, thank you for sharing that. And I want to emphasize that I did some reading because, again, this is about how we've transformed and healed, and education and reading has been that catalyst for transformation for me. I learned that a divorce and an incarceration of a parent or the death of a parent are equal in terms of the effect that they have on the child's psychology.
Wow.
Research shows that the divorce or having a parent that's incarcerated produces the same kind of instability that a death occurring in the family would engender. And so there is similarity between our experiences. And like you described, my father and mother, although they weren't married, we had a home. They lived together. My mother organized my life. I was told when to put my toys up, to ask permission to go out and play. And now that she's gone, we got one parent in the household. We no longer could sustain that household. We were forced to move from the East South Bronx to the South Bronx. And when we moved to this new area, we were subjected to what heroin looked like right outside our doorsteps, what dilapidated buildings looked like. My first neighborhood, I didn't have dilapidated buildings. There were homes. In this new community, there were tall buildings and there were dilapidated buildings and there were heroin and drugs all around me. And so going back to that one point that you made about going to prison and they wanted to emphasize that you were responsible, that it's not about what happened to you. That's something that I stand against fundamentally in my work because
Thank you.
it assumes that behavior grows out of a vacuum. And the reality is nobody makes a decision in a void. There are influences and impacts around us that shape the way we begin to think about ourselves and think about the world. And that's why labeling is so detrimental, because when we internalize those labels, when I start becoming the thing that I'm being told I am, whether it's a gangster, whether it's a hustler, whatever my peers are calling me or whatever the society is labeling me with, when I assume that, which is what happened for me, when they started demonizing me, I said, well, if you reject me, that rejection felt so intense. I was like, you know what? I'll show you ugly. I'll show you mean, because it almost felt natural to do that. Unfortunately, it was a response that would ultimately put a target on my back and subject me to almost 21 years of incarceration on an installment plan.
Mm-hmm. Talk about the stigma, because a lot of times people are so easy to judge when they haven't lived the life that you have. Tell me about the societal stigma that you have faced as someone who's been incarcerated more than once. However, like we said, that does not define who you are. But what do you come up against that stigma?
Okay, so just being quite honest with you, I have been somewhat of the exception to, I think, many of the people that I have encountered over the years coming out of prison. I
Mhm.
have this ability to communicate, which sets me apart because I can, number one, I can begin to think about my own thinking with new language. I can acquire new language and process my experiences with new understanding. That gives me an edge.
Mhm.
Secondly, when I go out into the public, if I put on the right clothes and I speak as I'm talking to you right now, I found that that's opened doors for me in spite of my background. And even though there were times when I acknowledged I had a criminal history and I was not qualified for a place to live, that has not been so consistent in my life in order to cripple me. I think the
Yeah.
biggest place stigma has affected me is in my own internal self-talk.
Hmm.
In my own internal self-talk.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. When
Talk
I
about it a
have,
little bit.
yes, thank you. So when I have started, as I said a moment ago, to believe the lies about me. And then when I believed the lies that we're being told about those that go to prison. So I started, some of the stuff is in the atmosphere. The idea
Mhm.
that everyone who goes to prison is capable of some of the most harsh
Heinous.
or despicable behavior, that just because I've gone to prison, you can't trust me around children, just because I've gone to prison, you can't trust me around your spouse. These are things I started believing the narrative that our society was telling about those who had been incarcerated.
Yeah, that's
And
self-talk.
yeah, and when I came home, I used to believe that on my forehead, this was my feeling. People could see he's just been coming out. He just come out of prison.
Mhm.
He used to use crack cocaine. And so,
Mhm.
although that was not the truth, it was true for me in my mind because I had not yet learned how to counter that way of self-sabotaging. And so what it took for me, one of the ways that I came through it, since we are emphasizing healing today,
Yeah.
was I remember going to a church. I remember uh, one day, against my own instincts to be quiet, I got up and I spoke and I told the audience, I'm formerly incarcerated. I've been in prison 21 years over the course of my life. I've been addicted to drugs. I did that. And when I was done, when I sat down, first of all the men came up to me and they put their hands on me and they prayed. Some had tears in their eyes. When I was done, and I was getting ready to leave the congregation, leave the church, some of the old ladies, one old lady in particular, walked up to me on a walker and she put a hand on my hand and she said, "Baby, I understand about them drugs. I do. I got a son. He's been in prison for 20 years now, and I pray for him a lot, baby. So thank you for talking about that." When she said those words to me, it transformed me because it made me understand that I'm making an assumption about people that's not true. Just like I'm making an assumption about myself that's not true, right? I'm not my last greatest mistake. I'm more than that.
Not at
And
all.
with these folk, they were sharing with me what by their genuine, response to my openness, they were letting me know they put their pants on just like I do,
Right.
one leg at a time. They
I
have challenges in their homes just like I do.
I
I'll
think
yield
it's
to you.
hard for us to wrap our minds around feeling good about ourselves because for so many years it's pumped into you, you are nothing. Don't feel good about yourself. Don't hold your head high. Don't be, what do you have to be proud of? So then when we come out and we have a multitude of things to be proud of, we're doing all the things and most of the time on a level that is above people who have been out here because
Yeah,
we are hungry, we are thirsty for it. But we've come from a place where self-esteem is beat down.
yeah, yeah.
Would you
I
agree?
get absolutely. I think what you're alluding to is that in prison, there are no positive reinforcing relationships.
No.
Generally speaking, I had to be very intentional about finding peers that I could have, intimate and personal, contact with. The guards and the system itself did not lend itself to guards or staff, you know, being open and honest with us and engaging with us on a human level. And so there was nothing reinforced. There was nothing that was there to reinforce. There was very little that was there to reinforce my humanity. I
Absolutely.
I was able to develop against the odds, in spite of the odds, not because of the circumstance that I was dealing with. And so coming home, those internal conversations that I began to have inside the prison, which is what writing helped me to do, sitting down and collecting my thoughts and putting them on paper helped me to see my own mind, and it helped
Mm.
me to interrogate my own thoughts, which is something that I had not done for the good majority of my life. I had ideas floating around in my head that other people had planted there, and they weren't mine, and they needed to be evicted, and that's what writing helped me to do.
Yeah, and I like that you said you interrogated your thoughts. So you went back and forth with these thoughts as to, hey, why? 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 And you know what? I asked myself that same time, that same question. Why do I feel like I'm not doing what I need to be doing when I know it, when on this level, on the surface level, of course I'm doing everything. On the inside, I'm worried. I'm worried that healing is still taking place in me. So
Mhm.
the book, well, I want to talk about this book. How can we find the book? Just
Okay.
go on the website.
Go on the website and go to my products page. I think it's called products page, but
Tell us the website one more time. Robert T. Lilly.
robertlilly.com. robertlilly.com. You can go there and you can find it on the products page. Just scroll through the pages. I may get that page title wrong, but I think maybe it's called another name. But it's all of the products that I have right now. This is the first one that we're releasing. I'm working on my memoir, and this was
Nice.
definitely a labor of love. The artwork, if you could tell, well, you
Mm-hmm.
can see is pencil sketch. It is done by a person named Noe Salinas, who's pictured here on the back. He's serving a life without parole sentence. This is
Wow.
my co-author, Lauren Ortel. She and I were corresponding back and forth for 4 years. And it was about at the second year, sharing poetry, sharing readings and magazines, that I realized I think I know why she's in my life. You know, you've heard the saying, somebody could be in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
I concluded that she was in my life because she was going to be the one to help me finally get to that place where I would publish and become an author, which is what I have been desiring to do on some level since I was 14 years old when I
I
first
love
started
that.
writing my raps.
Is there a poem you'd like to share with us?
I'm so glad you asked that because that's exactly what I was thinking. Since we're
Nice.
since we're talking about um, the wounds of incarceration and we're talking about healing, I want to share a poem that I wrote for my brother Conrad, who has been incarcerated for the last 21 years. And this is one of the most fragile spaces in my life. But my work today, the advocacy, the public speaking, the service to the community, it all grows out of my desire that somebody had been there, should have been there for my brother, wasn't there for him, but I can be there for other people in the ways that I wanted people to be there for both he and I. So it's entitled Their Bars Divide Us. All these years have gone by, beloved. You are right there, but still we can't touch. Their bars form a barrier between you and I. I've tried to bend them and set you free. My hands have grown callous. My strength, it failed me. Their bars separate us too. Long distances I've traveled, crossed bridge and border just to gaze upon your face through stained, fingerprint marked plexiglass. Their partitions keep us apart. Their bars divide us. Their work designed to break what we share. You told me not to cry. How could I not? Seeing you chained, manacled, a slave in fetters. My heart sinks at the mere thought of this image, flesh of my flesh. In twain we are cut. Their bars, a cold scalpel severing flesh from bone. Your letters, oft our only contact. No calls, no video, no connection except the memories of our innocent youth. I was supposed to be your protector. Mother taught me to be that. Yet now I feel almost too weak, too small to protect you still. Their bars keep me away from the brutes and bullies you dread. Hold on, dear beloved. Do not let them have your soul. One day you will soon come. No matter the wait, I shall be here like a grand oak standing tall, anticipating your return to my shade, your release from their bars.
Oh, amen. So powerful. So powerful. A letter written to someone with a life sentence. A
No,
letter written.
this one is actually written to my brother Conrad, and he's been in for 21 years, and he is a mental health patient. And the tragedy with his circumstances that when you're suffering from severe mental illness and you're prodded by the guards, it's almost a perpetual cycle of denial for parole. And so he might as well have a life sentence because 21 years have been of incarceration, and he's, in such an incapacitated state. I think it's a tragedy, and it's a
Yeah.
testament to the inhumanity of this particular type of system that relies so heavily on punishment.
Punishment. I get it. Not reform, not rehabilitation, not corrections, but punishment.
Punishment. Yes.
Dehumanization. On that, thank you, Robert. Thank you so much for coming on. I surely appreciate it. Leave us with a something about healing. Leave us with a thought, something. Interrogate our thoughts for us.
Well, this is not my saying, but I use it often because I think it's so profound in charging me with the task that I have to address the issues in my life. So, two things I'll say. One, I read in a book, I believe it was by Bo Lozoff, called We're All Doing Time. And he says that if you find that you were missing something, that something wasn't given to you as a child, and now you're grown, it is your responsibility to give it to yourself,
Oh,
right? It's your
wow.
responsibility to give it to yourself. So no longer, because for many years, my default was, look what happened to me. And it was
Mm,
true that some horrible things happened. But now, as a conscious thinking and rational adult, I have the charge to seize the reins of my life and to begin to organize it in such a way that I get the maximum benefit out of it. It's my life. And though the world needs changing and systems are broken, at the end of the day, there are certain things that I can and can't change. I cannot necessarily change the system single-handedly, but to whatever extent I can change myself, that's where my charge lies. And then I find other people that are equally motivated to change themselves and these systems, and I band together to change those things. That's for me healing. And the last word I'll give you is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
that's right.
You're right. And so whatever position you end up holding, whatever your perspective is, it will determine your behavior. It will determine your response. If you keep telling yourself that you can't do something, granted, you will not be able to do it. But if you continue to charge yourself with the admission that, you know what, I can overcome. I can do this. Your perspective will be right. Now, of course, the test will be in doing the thing, but at the end of the day, you have to first find that internal resolve, and motivation is an inside out job. No one can give it to you.
That's right. And that ripple effect. You do something good, you throw that rock out in the water, there's going to be a ripple. There's going to be good things. So that self-talk, watch it. Watch it. If it's saying you're not doing it but you are, interrogate your thoughts. I love that. Robert, thanks for coming on. We appreciate you. We appreciate you. Tell us the book's name one more time and we can get it off his website, roberttLilly.com.
It is
Inside
Inside
Out.
Out, a Texas prisons poetry story by Robert T. Lilly and Lauren Ortel, a friend of mine who wrote me over the course of